Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to the Niche Cast, coming at you on 20th of February 2024. Welcome, haere namaste, talofa. How are we all doing? Hope you're doing well. We're from the niche-case.com, where you can have a little gaze at some Aotearoa sporting yarns. We've done a big New Zealand Warriors Youngster report, in-depth thoughts and bits and bobs about the youngsters playing for New Zealand Warriors. We'll discuss all of this in the podcast, but if you can read good and you do love a bit of a read, have a read on our website, theniche-case.com. We've got a Wellington Phoenix deep dive about their academy that is still relevant after their results over the weekend. Got a Ford Trophy finals preview on the website as well. We'll have our weekly Flying Kiwis. We'll have the HBJ Shield finals preview. I don't know if I'm going to have time to write a preview to the Blackcaps versus Australia T20 squad, because that starts tomorrow on Wednesday and I won't have time. So we'll see how we go there, but the Blackcaps will be playing against Australia in a fun little T20 series, so we'll check in there. Obviously, we've got the Blackcaps test squad, so there might be a test preview done over the next week or so, but there is plenty of good Aotearoa sporting information on our website, theniche-case.com, where you can go deep into the mangroves about the regular Niche Case sporting beat. Most of what we discuss right now in the podcast and most of the stuff that we expand upon for our deep dives on our website, it was part of yesterday's newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Sign up for free. Every Monday and Friday evening, you get lots and lots and lots and lots of Aotearoa sporting information delivered straight to you. It's a newsletter coming through your email inbox, or if you got the Substack app or whatever, it'll be there for you. Either way, Monday and Friday, like clockwork, Aotearoa sporting information delivered straight to you. Like actual really important Aotearoa sporting information, not a lot of the bullkaka that you'll see elsewhere. Obviously, we don't care about rugby union. We don't care about netball. We care about the sports we care about, and you can read about those every Monday and Friday in our newsletter via Substack. Something that I won't be talking anywhere else about, but I did see that I wrote in the newsletter, was the stuff about Jack Howarth and Trey Mooney playing for the Māori All-Stars. And this is a very interesting little wrinkle because they played for New Zealand A last year. After playing under-19 Origin for Queensland and New South Wales, then they played for New Zealand A. Now they're playing for Aotearoa Māori. So they seem like they're on a little journey of reconnection to the great land of Aotearoa, and it'll be interesting to see where they, go with their eligibility. Ben Takura, big bopper for the Broncos, I think is born and raised in Australia, like Howarth, like Mooney, I believe. He also played for New Zealand A, but I'm not as confident about him playing for the Aotearoa Kiwis because he does seem like he's going to play for Queensland. But just something to watch out for. And another little thing I wrote in the newsletter is that I think, to the best of my knowledge, City Kickboxing no longer have a UFC champion. Israel Adesanya lost his championship bout to Sean Strickland a few months ago. And Alexander Volkanovski, he lost to Ilia Topuria over the weekend. So I'm really enjoying the CKB wrestling influence on the New Zealand Warriors, but they no longer have a UFC champion at the moment. And as I wrote in the newsletter, CKB used to have multiple champions and top 10 lads. Now they don't have a champion and they've got less top 10 lads. So that's kind of where City Kickboxing is at in the UFC. And of course, you would have read all of this overnight if you're signed up to our newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Monday and Friday dispatch completely free. All you got to do, whack in your email address, it's there for you. If you do want to support the Niche Case, you can upgrade to a paid subscription via Substack, and then you can access our subscriber podcast. What's the subscriber podcast? It's our other podcast delivered on a Thursday that is sent out through Substack and Patreon. So you can either upgrade to a paid Substack subscription and support us straight up the guts and access the subscriber podcast, which we'll probably be talking a fair bit about Blackcaps, usual Flying Kiwis beat, usual Kiwi-NRL, NZ Warriors, team list check every week. We're doing that. So tap in. You get that bonus content, but you're also supporting us straight up the guts. And that goes for patreon.com/our niche cache, as well as a paid Substack subscription. Did I miss anything there? What else are we doing? Any stuff you're writing about over the next week?
We're writing about, I've got 3 things hot in the works right now, and I don't know, well, we'll see what order they get published in, but Flying Kiwis is one of them. We'll be writing about the football Ferns and their exploits in qualifying for the Olympics. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And also, from a couple of the recent emails, I had some sort of Kane Williamson test match century kind of statistical deep dives, expanding that and bringing that into a full-on article, which is mostly written, and I had no idea they're playing a T20 tomorrow, so I might have to get cracking on that one first to get that one out. But that's one of those things where it's like looking at a fancy painting from 500 years ago, looking at Kane Williamson's stats and just sitting in awe of like, how did he do this? How did he accomplish this many things? It's unreal stuff. He's like, there are stats where it's like Don Bradman, Kane Williamson, and if you're doing that, you're doing something right.
Yeah, you did bloody piss me off a wee bit, because I've been cooking. I've been cooking this idea that Kane Williamson is the best batter ever, and your stats do not reinforce that, because your stats always put up Don Bradman, the big Donny himself, the biggest Donny of them all, Don Bradman.
The original Donny.
He's the best batter ever. So like my hot take, if no one's looking at stats and they see Kane Williamson, wow, he's got a couple of centuries, well, Kane Williamson, he's the man. And then I come out and I say he's the best batter ever, and then they check your stats, he's not the best batter ever. So I'm not sure what's doing there. We're not on the same page.
You know what though? Don Bradman, he hasn't got 6 centuries at Seddon Park. Don Bradman only scored hundreds against 4 different countries. Kane Williamson scored hundreds against 9 different countries. We need to schedule a test match against Afghanistan or Ireland so Williamson can become the first player to score 100 against 10 different teams. We also got to go back to Zimbabwe, or them come here, because if he scores another 100 against Zimbabwe, he'll have multiple hundreds against every team that he's played against, which seems incredible. I think his best now is against South Africa. No surprises after he just added 3 of them. And I think that was the first time he's not the first time a New Zealander scored 3 centuries in one series, but it's the first time a New Zealander scored 3 centuries in a 2-match series. The other times have all been 3-match series. Most recent was actually Daryl Mitchell in England. He scored 300s over there. So yeah, Kane Williamson still does have some stuff that he can say, Don Bradman, mate, you never did that.
I suspect Don Bradman had injuries, and I suspect he was probably packed.
Well, I don't know if he had injuries, but he had a war in the middle of his career, which...
Yeah, he had a war. He was probably smoking a few cigarettes, eating a few pies and whatnot. So I don't want to say the biggest Donny of them all that he was soft, but like Kane Williamson just did his ACL and then kept scoring runs. He might have broken a bone in his hand. It's like I don't know what was happening when he got smashed on the hand at the World Cup, fresh after coming back from an ACL injury, scoring runs, gets whacked on the hand, keeps scoring runs, but I mean, like, he's doing some great things there, like not just the pure run production, but when you think about Kane Williamson and everything he's endured as far as injuries and whatnot, to expand on your Kane Williamson stuff, well, here's one of the key stats that I'm referring to. You've got Kane Williamson has scored a century in 18.6% of his test innings, which is pretty cool. Not the highest for Kiwis, though. John Reid, far less games, far less centuries. He scored a test century in 19.35% of his test innings. And Don Bradman, he was at 36.25% of his test innings were centuries. So obviously that is a fantastic little stat there. But I I think I did this in the second test debrief, Blackcaps versus South Africa, and this is officially the Kane Williamson is the best batter ever segment of the podcast. He, since returning from ACL, ruptured ACL, he scored runs in India, he scored runs in Bangladesh, he scored runs in New Zealand, he's scoring runs in different formats, because I think he scored runs in a T20 series against Pakistan, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know, but he's scored runs in the ODI World Cup, tests in Bangladesh, tests in New Zealand, different opponents, all in a small time period after rupturing his ACL. So that's pretty good. And to continue this, while on this topic, this is a significant reason for optimism around Kyle Jamieson, because obviously we did get the news about Kyle Jamieson. He's got a stress fracture, so he's out of the test series against Australia. All good. New Zealand's flush with seam bowling depth, so we lose one big tall seamer. We've got another big tall seamer right there, Will O'Rourke, the big war. But we've already seen Kane Williamson come back from an ACL. We've seen Michael Bracewell come back from an Achilles in less than a year. So if there is any cricket playing country that can help Kyle Jamieson overcome his injury battles, it is New Zealand. It is the Blackcaps setup. It is Chris Donaldson's training. It is all the people in the Kiwi mana that goes into those comeback journeys. Like, we've literally seen Kane Williamson come back from an ACL within a year. We've seen Michael Bracewell come back from a ruptured Achilles in less than a year. Just saying, Kyle Jamieson, he's going to probably be all right. Like, he's obviously got to take some time away from cricket, but there is this theme emerging of really good fitness, rehab, recovery, preparation with the Blackcaps, and I think that's going to set up Kyle Jamieson nicely.
And if it doesn't, well, we do have Will O'Rourke, and it did feel like that was a sort of a promotion that was in some way designed to be like, we need a Kyle Jamieson backup. And then dude comes in, takes 9 wickets in his first test match. I think that one's tracking all right there, you know?
I think it's less Kyle Jamieson backup and like who's the next best bowler. Because Will O'Rourke's really good at bowling. I think he's still Canterbury's best forward trophy bowler, even though he's missed a bunch of games recently. And in our newsletter, shout out to the Substack newsletter, after the first test, I did write hot take. I think it's called a colon, ... Is that a colon or is that a semicolon? Who knows? Who cares?
Semicolon is a dot with a comma at the bottom, and the colon is the 2 dots.
Fantastic. So it was hot take, colon, Will O'Rourke, who hadn't played a test yet, is better than every South African seamer in their test squad. And I wrote that after the first test. Because, I mean, the South African seamers, they're good, they're accurate, they're bowling 135 Ks, bit of seam, but there was a bad ball every so often, whatever. And then Will O'Rourke comes out, takes 9 wickets. He's the leading wicket taker for Blackcaps seamers in that test series. He's nibbling the ball both ways, 138 kilometers per hour. I think that hot take turned into a leftover meal. Put it in the fridge overnight, it cools down, it's there for you in the morning. So it wasn't a hot take, it was just a chilly take. And that was Will O'Rourke is and was better than all of those South African seamers who toured Aotearoa. And that's the Aotearoa cricketing depth. Do you want to get some mindfulness out while we're here?
Yeah, since we're here. This is from my mate Carl Gustav Jung. I'm dipping back into that one again because I was reading some things there in his book that I'm very, very slowly getting through. But he dropped a bomb on this one where he said, in spite of our proud domination of nature, our being humanity, in spite of our proud domination of nature, we are still her victims, for we have not even learned to control our own nature.
We can barely control. It's not about like me controlling your nature. as a fellow human being. It's that I can't even control my own nature. And it's like we compensate for the lack of control we have over our own nature. We compensate for that by controlling others, but more importantly, Mother Nature. Because like we can exert our will over the natural elements of this world rather easily. So it's like, shit, I can't even make myself feel happy. So, screw these plants.
So I have to make other people feel sad. Yeah. Yeah, that compensation idea is that's a fantastic point. That's like, that sums it up very well. That caught me out by how perceptive that was.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well done. You upped Mr. Young there. Well, I mean that's kind of what he's getting at anyway, I think. But yeah, the other aspect of that is this idea that trying to control nature and trying to control your own nature, trying to control external nature is missing the point of there isn't really any external nature, because humans are also natural entities. Humans are animals. Humans are part of the cycle of life. Humans are part of this whole thing. And trying to create dominion over the world around us is also just imprisoning ourselves, same as it is everything else. And yeah, I think that is very, very definitely an expression that comes out of people's lack of self-control, is then trying to exert that elsewhere. It stems from within. As above, so below.
The biggest New Zealand sporting story performance, apart from Kane Williamson being the best batter ever, the emergence of Big War, Will O'Rourke, the most important Kiwi sports story right now is a basketball player for the best team in the NBL, Shea Ili, or as who's talking here? Joe Luau Aquil, as he calls him, Shilly. Do love
Shilly.
that. Shea Ili, aka Shilly. He was awarded Defensive Player of the Year overnight. And in our newsletter yesterday, you alluded to the fact that he should win that award. And you had a few quotes. So one of them is Joe Luau Aquil, who is his teammate. This is what he said about Shea Ili. We have this guy named Shea Ili. He should be Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's pretty criminal he hasn't won one yet. So you media guys, come on, man. It's pretty obvious who the best defensive player is. He leads us a lot. When Shilly is up and in, then IC gets up and in. Delhi gets up and in. As bigs, we don't want to let them down with all of that effort they put in. When Shilly is super locked in, and he's always locked in, it just gives us pace and easy transition points. Another quote from an opposition player. Anyone who's watched the NBL this season has seen how dominant Melbourne United's defense has been, and the head of that snake is Shea Ili. He picks up full court, is diving on loose balls all the time, finds ways in little niches that he has in his defensive schemes. It's his timing. It's his understanding of the game. He does it all defensively, and that's why he's the best defender in the league. Shea Ili, NBL Defensive Player of the Year. Do you have any, because you've talked a lot about Shea Ili over the past few seasons and how impactful he is. Is there anything he's done differently this season? And do you have any kind of specifics about the way Shea Ili plays basketball that can help us celebrate the young man Shilly?
Mr. Shilly, I think, because he gets shortlisted for DPOY most years. Like the last 3 or 4 years, he's been in and around that kind of conversation. He's been close. He hasn't quite won it. Once or twice, that might have been an awkward one where maybe he, could have, should have. It's all subjective with these things. But he was in the mix last year despite only playing half the season, because he had his concussion issues last year and he missed quite a bit of time. I think he might have had another injury as well on top of that at one point. He only played about half of the season and he still got nominated for Defensive Player of the Year. So this year, the big difference is not that he's been better. He's been as good as he always is defensively. He's just played a bit more. He's been available for pretty much the bulk of the season. I don't know, 80, 90% of the games. And when that's the case, and your team is also the best team in the NBL, but more specifically the best defensive team in the NBL, because when they were starting off, that's where it all stemmed from. They've blossomed it out a bit now, settled their inputs in, scoring more points. But definitely to begin with, also Chris Gould's having a fantastic year. He was shortlisted for MVP. But it started with just really good defense. And we've just had two different examples, one from a teammate and who was actually injured at the start of the season, because that's when he was the dude who was out, Joe Lualo-Keel, who was the guy who was out for Rob Lowe to be the injury replacement for the first couple months of the season. And Rob Lowe was coming in playing good defense as well. He was doing excellent things. And yeah, two different examples there, one from a teammate, one from, I think it was Alan Williams from Phoenix, who's I think an import for Phoenix, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. So two contrasting, but contrasting places to draw those quotes from, but also one on his side of the team, one on the other side of the court, both saying the same thing about this is the best defense in the league. And it starts with this guy. He sets the tone. He begins it. He's the first guy to pressure. He's the last one diving on the ball. He just, yeah, it's one of those things you see it. I guess you could say in a way it's kind of like what's the word for this? A boiled down version of not even boiled down. It's just, the sort of the Tall Blacks mana type way of playing, where it's very selfless, very in it for your Kiwi teammates way. And the Kiwi way, and doing the hard yards, the 1%ers, all that kind of stuff. Shea Ili is just doing that at an elite NBL kind of level, which at an elite level sounds like such an Americanism, but whatever. Unfortunately, that sport is full of it, so you can't avoid that stuff. But that's what Shea Ili does. He's that good, and he's been the trendsetter for the best team in the NBL across the entirety of the season. And he does have that Melbourne team does have a big challenger in the Perth Wildcats, whose second half of the campaign was outrageously good. They're clearly the two best teams, but guess what? Perth have got a few Kiwis as well, helping them establish things. So that final series is going to be fun when that comes around. I think maybe the play-ins and the stuff before that, maybe a little bit more. I think we kind of know how those are going to go, but leave the door open for knockout basketball. But yeah, good yarns from Shea Ili. I'm glad to say, you don't want to put too much emotional impact into awards, because we know that these things, first of all, individual awards in a team sport are always a little bit of a sketchy thing sometimes. But there's also that's not how he plays. The reason he's won this award is because he plays so selflessly. So to single him out is probably the kind of thing I don't know that that's necessarily his favorite thing, but that kind of spotlight. But it's also a legacy aspect of this, where it's this dude deserves this recognition. Everyone around him saying he deserves the recognition, and he's got the recognition. So it's beautiful to see, and it's beautiful to celebrate.
I am hoping those two teams just go straight to the grand finals, whatever they call it, because then you might get Shea Ili versus Ty Webster or something like that, some sort of matchup. You'll probably get Shea Ili versus Hiram Harris to some extent, given the way Shea Ili loves to defend. The Breakers are in the finals mix, though. I think they had a win over Brisbane, and then they lost to Adelaide. So that sums up the Breakers. We've talked about this every week. It's been rinse and repeat for the Breakers. They win, they lose. They win, they lose. They win, they lose. And their latest round of win and lose featured or came against two of the worst four teams. So again, that tells you everything you need to know about the Breakers. They beat one of the teams below them, and they lost to one of the teams below them. But they are in the wider finals mixture. And they will play the Sydney Kings next Wednesday. Holy cow, that's a long way away. Which is important because, as you wrote in our newsletter, when the Breakers have at least 4 days of rest between games, they are 13-6. When the Breakers have 3 or fewer days of rest between games, they are 0-9. So they have, you wrote 9 days rest. There's probably 8 days at the time of recording. So they should win this game. They're going to win, and it's going to be quite an easy win. However, this game is also in Sydney. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the Breakers go. I think we'll talk a bit more about that next Tuesday because it is a week away. So who knows what will happen there. I'm just going to float it out there. I think the most important player for the Breakers is Isaiah Liafa. There's a lot else happening. There's Cheatham. There's McDowell White, who's now re-injured his shoulder, so he probably won't be playing that game, which may mean more opportunities for Liafa. But I was watching some of that Adelaide game, and Liafa, he's shooting threes. He is also a really good defender. Maybe he's not as good as Shea Ili, but he is a really good defender, defending multiple positions. He shoots threes. He sets screens. He drives to the hoop. And that means he either gets a layup or he makes a pass to someone who's going to shoot. And I think, especially with Parker Cartwright, the smaller guard who you wrote is in the MVP equation, if you got a smaller guard, Liafa has to play a bigger role in more ways than one, because he needs to be really solid defensively. He needs to be using his physical presence. And I think a lot of the stuff that Liafa does goes under the radar. So I'm throwing out Isaiah Liafa as an early watch out for this dude and someone I might talk more about next week. Do you have any thoughts about the Breakers heading into that game against Sydney? Again, it is next Wednesday. We will be recording next Tuesday, so you don't need to go deep into it, but what's top of mind for you a week out from that game?
Well, I'll second the point on Isaiah Liafa because I think, the injury to McDowell White, which is almost certainly going to keep him out probably for the whole playoff run. Like, that's probably just his season done. He's dislocated his shoulder again. So that does thrust Isaiah Liafa into a bigger role. And Isaiah Liafa, this isn't necessarily to say he's going to be the most important player. It doesn't mean he's going to be the best player. It just means he's maybe the guy who's going, what you're going to get from Parker Jackson Cartwright is going to give you probably 25 points and 5 assists or something like that. He's been very consistent throughout. You kind of don't know what you're going to get from Liafa, which is why he's so important, because if he comes in and gives you 15 points, that can be a match-winning contribution. Like, that can be the difference between victory and defeat. If he comes in and shoots, 2 of 8 and scores 6 points or something like that, then you might well find that the Breakers have lost by 5 points or that kind of thing. Like Liafa, and we saw this really specifically from him at the World Cup with the Tall Blacks, where when he did well, the Tall Blacks won. When he didn't do well, the Tall Blacks lost. And that did also coincide with, they lost to teams that were better than them and beat teams that were not better than them. So he was, the games he was doing well in were the games that were a little bit easier to do well in. But he didn't quite have the, you could see at that tournament, he didn't, because he is a lot like Shea Ili. He's maybe not as good as driving to the rim and drawing contact and getting to the foul line as Shea Ili is absolutely fantastic at doing. He doesn't quite have that, but the rest of his game is quite similar. He's a similar kind of defender. He's a similar kind of, he can spot up and shoot threes and that kind of stuff. Good mentality, all that, similar size even. But he doesn't have the sort of game-to-game consistency that Shea Ili had throughout that World Cup, where he was going to give you a certain level every single time, whereas Liafa fluctuated. And I think that's an aspect now the Breakers, who are as light-handed as ever, they need him to have a good game against Sydney, and then also to have a good game against if they win the Sydney game, they would then progress to play the loser of Illawarra and Tasmania. And the dumb thing about this is if the Breakers had just beaten Adelaide, who were already eliminated at the point, if they'd just done that and won that game, they'd have home court advantage against Sydney. If they'd won by 5 or more points, they'd have actually finished fourth and skipped out on this game entirely and effectively bought themselves a second life because they'd have been able to, they'd be playing in the third versus fourth game where even if they lost, they'd still be able to play the winner of fifth versus sixth. So by being the typical fluctuating breakers that they are, they've made things a whole lot more difficult than they needed to because they're a better team than Adelaide. They finished higher on the table. That's proof that they're a better team. But they couldn't win on a short turnaround, and they haven't been able to win on short turnarounds all season, which I looked that up because I had a suspicion. I didn't expect it was going to be so like black and white. No, this is like concrete fact is they just lose every time they're on a short turnaround. I thought it would be a little bit of, it might be a few weeks where they lost the first game and won the second game, but apparently not. Apparently they just always lose, but which does make some sense when you look at the Breakers being a team that has a shorter rotation than other teams and, it has had a few injuries and, fatigue would be an issue. That maybe the travel factor, although I don't see how that necessarily counts when there's a team from Perth, which is further away from Sydney, Melbourne than Auckland is. So, that's just what the Breakers have been doing all season. But maybe Isaiah Leafra will be able to step up. And also, we didn't see Finn Delaney in the Adelaide game. They gave him a rest because of him coming back from injury. Second game of the weekend. He had a break for that game as well, which maybe wasn't the smartest idea because you could have given him a break. You had 9-10 days or whatever until the next game. You could have just won that game, bought yourself an extra life, and then earned that break back later down the line. But we'll see. Hopefully, this is a thing where because they've had a few injuries, because there's no Anthony Lamb, Finn Delaney will have to be more important. Because there's no Will McDowell-White, Isaiah Leafra will have to be more important. So if they're going to do anything in this final series, some of those Kiwi fellas are going to have to be the guys who do a lot of that heavy lifting. And of course, Tom Abercrombie's potentially last game of his glittering career.
In Christchurch, there was a preseason challenge game between the New Zealand Warriors and the West Tigers. And I will dive deeper into the young players in a jiffy because I found this game fascinating because the climax of the game was aligned with my interests. So the game got more interesting. It was a close affair in the last 10 to 15 minutes, and that's when the Warriors and the Tigers really went deep into their depth, rolling out all the young players. And for preseason trials, I couldn't give a shit what was happening. Apart from the young players, I'm seeing a lot of takeaways from preseason footy, and when you consider that some NRL players are playing against SG Ball players, some New South Wales Cup players are playing against NRL players, taking the takeaways from preseason trials games just seems insane. And I'm not here to say Roger Tuivasa-Sheck sucks, because obviously he doesn't, right? Like, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's really good. He's pretty damn impressive. But I've got not a unique perspective. I think I've got a very specific perspective with the Kiwi-NRL goggles on. So when I'm watching the Tigers, I'm looking out for Sione Latoa Vaihu. A couple of these lads, they add a name, they take a name away. So Warriors have Eddie Iramia Tuiava, who I've usually referred to as Eddie Iramia. Sione Vaihu, his official title now is Senior Sione Latoa Vaihu. So I was watching out for him. I think he was number 28. I was like, this dude, he's probably the best Kiwi-NRL prospect in the Tigers system. He's a Waitemata junior from Auckland. Shout out Chris Viaila, who is also a Waitemata junior. He was playing centre for the Sharks against his former team, the Knights. He also looked powerful, robust, and eager. So watch out for him with the Sharkies. So I'm okay. I'm watching the Warriors, but I'm also watching an eye out for Latoa Vaihu. But then I see number 28, which is like when you consider their NRL top 30s. And both teams, every NRL trial team, you're dealing with number 26, number 27, number 28, 29, right? This is well down in the depth chart. And I'm watching number 28, Latoa Vaihu. He's on the field pretty early. And he's having a tough time against Tuivasa Sheck. I think what happened is Latoa Vaihu went to right centre. This is all off the top of my head, so excuse me if I get this wrong. But he either played right edge or right centre when Declan Casey, I think, got knocked out by Zion Mai'u. Unfortunate incident. More on that in a jiffy. But Latoa Vaihu he's trying to play New South Wales Cup. And he's marking Tuivasa Sheck. So this sums up the whole trial thing. It's like, whoa, Roger Tuivasa Sheck, he's amazing. He was playing against the guy who's trying to crack into New South Wales Cup, right? You know, like these are the trial matchups that are really the veil of illusion, I think, is quite profound here. Roger Tuivasa Sheck, there's no illusions about his ability. He's fantastic. But he's also marking up against the lad who is a few levels below him in the NRL pedigree chart. So big up Latoa Vaihu. I thought he was actually quite good for the Tigers, playing a bit of edge, maybe a bit of centre. He could even play middle forward. But unfortunately for him, he spent most of his minutes marking up against Tuivasa Sheck. So take it both ways. Good for Latoa Vaihu, good for Tuivasa Sheck, but also this is trials footy summed up in a nutshell. Speaking of the red card to Zion Mai'u, like that was unfortunate, and you don't want to be tackling like that. That's a recipe to get you off the field, and hopefully old mate from the Tigers, Casey's all good. All that good, warm and fuzzy stuff. Taking all that warm and fuzzy stuff into account, I actually love the red card. Because I think it sums up Zion Mai'u. I don't think Zion Mai'u is a reckless player, but he is a high-energy, vigorous forward. And this is why, what do I always say about Zion Mai'u?
Imminent cult hero.
Imminent cult hero. As soon as he runs it straight at Mount Smart in an NRL game, he will be a cult hero. He will be a fan favourite. Smashing a bloke in the head isn't part of that at all. Let me get that clear. But it was a small glimpse at the vigour with which Mai'u and the New Zealand Warriors youngsters play with. Because every time Ali Leotawa runs the ball, he's moving forward. And anytime anyone goes near him, he's doing the Rocco Berry wrap him up impersonation. Jacob Laban, what does he do? He moves the ball forward, that's for sure. And if you've got Jacob Laban and Ali Leotawa defending next to each other, they're probably going to wrap some blokes up. So the energy that I saw from Mai'u, it is the same energy that all these New Zealand Warriors youngsters play with, and that is why I'm so high and such a believer in the youngsters that the New Zealand Warriors have. I am fairly confident that I believe they are one of the best crops of youngsters in the NRL. And let's expand that because, Leka Halasima played a fairly big shift in the middle. And that is important because last year for New South Wales Cup, he was playing a bit of edge, bit of middle, and if there was an injury at centre, he'd go out to centre. Leka Halasima barely broke a sweat playing in the middle against the Tigers. And that's just because he just makes footy look easy. He's not overly beefy, he's not overly tall, but he is a monster. And he is, as I think Monty Beetham said in the commentary, he's 18 years old, he's still SG Ball eligible. And again, I don't like to compare teams in the trial because much like how teams use their SG Ball teams, their Jersey Flegg teams, every team is running a different operation for the trial. So some teams are going to have all their juniors playing. Some teams are going to have all their starters playing. Like, it's a mess to compare and contrast. The Tigers had some SG Ball lads who had just played SG Ball, like, to start the season. And that's their development plan. That's fine. Leka Halasima is too good for SG Ball. He played a few SG Ball games last year, and he was quickly shuffled into New South Wales Cup while he was 17 years old. Then he comes out in the first trial game, he's 18 years old, and he's just cruising around in the middle. Every run, oomph. And that's the key word I wrote in the news that in the Youngster report on our website is oomph. Because when Aliatau runs the ball, it's oomph. When Jacob Laban runs the ball, it's with oomph. Leka Halasima, he is oomph. Everything he does has oomph. And I loved what Leka Halasima was doing in the middle. Tanistao Smith comes on. He looks a bit smaller. He's got the red headgear. He's playing in front of the Christchurch crowd. He's fizzed up. He's a bit smaller, but he runs with vigor into the defensive line. We just go on and on. Patrick Moimoi comes on, and this is a dangerous little anecdote because Patrick Moimoi, I didn't see a whole lot of rugby league, like junior rugby league footy in his background. To best of my knowledge, he primarily played rugby union. I think he played for Manukau Rovers at some stage. I think he played first 15 for De La Salle College. He reminds me of Conrad Hurrell and Ngani Laumape. Now, neither of them really kicked on in league after moving from rugby union to rugby league, so I don't want to shout that from the rooftops. But Patrick Moimoi is ridiculously powerful, and he is robust, and he also went from SG Ball to New South Wales Cup last year. So he might be 19 years old. And you keep going, suddenly Moala Graham Talfa, he comes on in the game, and he's bursting through tackles. He's tall, he's lean, and he is quick. And if it's not Moala Graham Talfa, well then you've got Setu too, who I think there's two types of rugby league wingers. There is the Moala Graham Talfa type, which is he's an athlete. You can see it. He's tall, he's fast, he's strong. Then there's the Setu 2 type of winger, who's just a natural. He's a natural winger. In the same sense that Jordan Rapana is a natural winger. Ronaldo Mulatalo's cut from this cloth as well, where it's instincts, it's freaky plays, it's finishing, it's chip and chase, it's contorting your body. So I think Dylan Watene-Zalesniak, he's more of the athlete. And then you've got the others who are more instincts and just freaky. And that's Setu too. Like, he's just always in the right place. He always finishes. He's got the razzle-dazzle in him. So you got a couple of outside backs there. But as I said, all of this got real funky in the last 10 minutes. First and foremost, the Warriors won these 60 minutes that they were down to 12 players. So again, both teams went towards the youngsters. So I'm not comparing and contrasting. This isn't to say the Tigers sucked because they lost that 60 minutes stint. Who cares? None of that matters. I'm saying for the Warriors, how these young players responded. They scored 2 tries. The West Tigers scored 1 try while Zion Maiu was off the field, while the Warriors were battling that red card adversity. But all of that happened while all the young players were on the field for the Warriors. And there were a couple of late moves that really impressed me. So we got a small, brief sighting of Luke Hansen on the field. For those who don't know, Luke Hansen, he played SG Ball and Jersey Flegg for the Penrith Panthers last year as a playmaker. Ben Farr also got lots of game time in this trial, and he is someone who's, some might view him as being on the fringe of the NRL squad. He's like half as good as Luke Hansen. So Luke Hansen got less minutes. He made a couple of good tackles. He had a big kick. And he is far more likely to play NRL football over the next 2 seasons than Ben Farr. So don't worry about Ben Farr. Whatever you thought about Ben Farr in this trial, who cares? He's not the halves prospect to watch out for. It is Luke Hansen, straight out of the Panthers setup. There was also Ituati Fukafuka. Now, Ituati Fukafuka, he was a halfback in rugby union at St. Peter's College in first 15, joins the Warriors where he plays hooker for SG Ball last year. Now again, peeped a trend here. Halasima, Moi Moi, Eri Iramia Toiava, who I think primarily played edge forward in the trial. He's a massive unit as well. You know, all these dudes who played SG Ball, they also played New South Wales Cup last year. It wasn't under 19s, under 21s. It was under 19s New South Wales Cup. But Fuka was playing hooker for SG Ball, and in the trial, he played as a middle forward with Paul Roach playing at hooker. And I like Paul Roach. Paul Roach is quick. He's got a bit of a craft to him. I think a way I was thinking about it is that Paul Roach is more similar to Wade Egan, as he's like just a crafty, pure dummy half. And Freddie Lussick is more similar to Fuka in the sense that they are rugged hookers. But Fuka, well, he's got a first 15 kicking background. So he's got all the kicking skills, whether it's kicking goals, kicking long, kicking short. He's a really good kicker. He's a really good passer. But against the Tigers, he was smashing dudes. So I think the best comparison, the best forecast for Fuka is Saliva Havili, and a very dynamic hooker who can also play middle forward. And that's how Fuka always say it. This is how you'll get your opportunities. You're not going to get your opportunities in your specialist position. You're going to get your opportunities in the versatility you offer. And I think Keilani Going is being developed as a small forward. Fuka is next in line in that small forward position who can also play hooker. And I was really impressed with Fuka, just his physicality, his oomph. Like all these Warriors dudes have oomph. They all are aggressive. Zion Mai'u redlined that aggression. But when I was watching New South Wales Cup last year, that aggression saw him dominate fringe NRL forward packs while he was SG Ball eligible himself. And I just found that last 10 to 15 minutes of the game the most interesting, because this young group of Warriors were trying to win the game while down to 12 players, and they got close. Like, they only lost by a conversion. I also saw Quinlan Tupou. I don't expect anyone to know who Quinlan Tupou is. But if you follow the niche case, you will know, because I was writing about him in the preview to this game, because I was amazed that he was in the squad, considering I had never really heard of him before. But then you dive into it, and he was with the Warriors in the junior ranks, and then he went down, followed more of a rugby union pathway. He was playing Premier Rugby in Auckland last year. Now he's in the Warriors kind of fringe NRL squad, and his first run, he got like 10 meters. I couldn't suss out exactly what position he was playing. It might have been a bit of left centre. It might have been, edge forward, although Iramia Toiava was there. It was a bit tricky to suss that out. But I was like, oh, Quinlan Tupou's on the field. Oh my God, he's running the footy. He's carrying blokes with him. And he is like the least known of these young Warriors players who are playing in that trial. So to me, watching that trial and how the trial played out, from the red card, everything else, it only filled me with more confidence that these young Warriors are really good. I think Leotawa has the most upside for the most NRL minutes this season, because I really do think he can play wing. He can play a lot of positions. Laban seems like more of a straight-up edge forward, so he needs to wait for an opportunity behind Kurt Capewell, Jackson, Ford, Niokore. But like 10 minutes off the bench, Halasima can do that. Stella Smith can do that. Mai'u can do that. Iramia Toiava can do it. But that's all they're building towards this season, because Tom Ale, Bunty Afoa, they started as the props against Tigers. During the NRL season, they're going to play 20 minutes. That's it. If the stars align, they might play 25 minutes. If a greater opportunity presents itself, injury, suspension, concussion, whatever, they might play 30, 35 minutes. But these roles aren't very big. So when I'm talking about the young forwards, I'm literally talking about impact off the bench, go crazy for 10 minutes. Don't get red carded, just bring the ruckus. But someone like Ali Leotawa, he has scope for the biggest role out of these young players. And I would expect, given what I saw against the Tigers, Luke Hansen, I think he's still Jersey Flag eligible. But I would expect him to be playing a lot of New South Wales Cup in the halves this season. And that is especially interesting considering Sean Johnson, Tamaita Martin, Luke Metcalf, Chanel Harris-Tavita, maybe even Ben Farr. They are 5 halves competing for 4 spots across the 2 squads. But what's if Luke Hansen's playing for New South Wales Cup? And I think it's possible that Luke Hansen is going to make a significant impression with the Warriors this season in New South Wales Cup as a young half. And yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in on thinking that the Warriors, let's say top 5. I think that's a safe zone right now. Top 5 youngsters, just a crop of youngsters coming into the NRL. I think the Warriors are top 5 for sure. And yeah, let me chill out. Let me take a breath, chill out. Top 5 crop of youngsters in the NRL.
And we're expecting, like, from this sort of Warriors crop of youngsters, we're expecting something similar to the Phoenix here, right? Where, like, the Wellington Phoenix blokes in particular, because, you know, I did just write about these academies, and the women's academy is definitely getting towards some things, but it just hasn't had as long to sort of, I don't know, gestate or whatever. The men's academy has been functioning pretty well for several years, and they're at the point now where it's like, if somewhat, like, there's a set sort of, well, with them it's really only like a set starting 11, and then beyond that you start to dip into the academy guys. But definitely, like, on the weekend we saw it. Tim Payne's out. Oscar Van Hatten will slide back and do a job there, and then Matt Sheridan will come on for his second appearance ever to cover the last half an hour. Or, you know, Alex Roof is ruled out late. Well, Finn Conchi is going to step up. Like, we're expecting something like that from the Warriors, are we? Where it's sort of they have a set team. Like, they've got a 17, probably a couple more than that, which is, you know, solid, consistent, building off of what they achieved last year. But during the course of the season, when there are injuries, when there are sort of things, it's that, like, we're going to start seeing, we're going to see them trusting these types of players that we saw in this trial game stepping up, is it? Or I don't think they got any sort of battlers hanging on the fringes of the things that I can think of. Like, I'm imagining that's what we're building towards, at least, isn't it? Is something like what the Phoenix are doing, where it's, you have your set, yeah, like you have your top team, but when someone from there is unavailable, you just dip into the youngsters coming through, rather than necessarily the having like a crop of experienced battlers or whatever, like the Phoenix in particular have been very prominent of doing in the past, in previous eras.
I think it's pretty, as always, it's extremely similar. That's the major theme of the niche case, is the comparison between the Warriors and the Phoenix. You did kind of salvage what you're saying there, because you said, like, trusting the youngsters, but then you went more in the direction of opportunities present themselves during the season, and that's the key thing. It's not like, I just think a lot of the top 17 players are better, and they are better now.
And of course they are. Yeah.
So, but so the opportunities will present themselves, and that's where it's like, as we're seeing with the Phoenix, what do the young players do? Chiefy gets them playing 5 minutes at the end of this game, 10 minutes at the end of the next game, and then suddenly they're playing 45 minutes because someone got injured, then they're starting another game. That's what will happen during the season. So if you're worried about the depth, don't worry. Because, like, so Halasima, I think he's one of the best prospects across the whole NRL. He won't play more than 20 minutes if he makes his debut this year. That's it. You don't need him any more than that. And Andrew Webster, of all people, is going to know how to manage these players and develop them over the course of the season. But you might not see any of these dudes this season. because the top 17 might just stay solid. And like again, I mentioned like there's 4 halves right there. Sean Johnson, Tamari Martin, Luke Metcalf, Chanel Harris, Tavita. 4 halves. There's no space for another half, like right there, even though I'm talking up Luke Hansen. Okay, Jacob Laban, he's awesome. Well, he's not starting ahead of Kurt Capewell. I doubt he's starting ahead of Jackson Ford. And you're not going to give him a bench spot, because on your bench, you're going to have Bunty Afoa, Tom Alley, Jazz Tavanga, Dylan Walker. Maybe another hooker, Freddie Lussick, because Wade Egan always gets injured. But then if we're signing Kurt Capewell to move Niokore to the middle, then we're going to start with Jackson Ford and Kurt Capewell on the edges and Niakore's on the bench. So suddenly the bench is Dylan Walker, Niokore, Bunty Afoa, Tom Alley. Like there's no space for any youngsters in the top 17. There might be space for Leotawa. There might be space for Laban. There might be a bit of space for Dimitri Sifakula, who I haven't mentioned yet because he's out injured, and he made his NRL debut last year, can play middle, can play edge. They might get a bit of game time, but they, as is the case with the Phoenix, they are really good. The youngsters are really good, and like, so if you're Costa Barbarouses, you're thinking, damn, I got to be good, because these young dudes are pretty good. If I'm Neil Wagner, I'm like, whoa, crikey, Jack, Will O'Rourke looks pretty good. I might need to take some wickets. That is what is happening with the Warriors. And if you've got an emotional attachment to Bunty Afoa, Jazz Tavanga, Tom Alley, you might need to do some mindfulness and work through that emotional attachment, because, you know, any number of these youngsters might be more impactful than those dudes this season in their opportunities. I'm not saying they are better right now. I'm saying that is the competition for spots in the squad, because Bunty Afoa is training every day with Leka Halasima. And he knows Leka Halasima is 18 years old. He's just as powerful as Bunty Afoa. He's more versatile than Bunty Afoa. So if it comes down to a bench spot and you're thinking, how do we build our bench? Late in the season, couple of injuries. Well, Tom Alley or Bunty Afoa, they can only play prop. Where Leka Halasima can play middle, but he can also cover edge. Like, that's how you build your bench positions. I think that is a bit different to football, where that versatility really matters, because your bench in football is like 10 players, and then you can use 5 subs if it's still that rule. I'm not sure if it's the COVID rule or what. But in NRL, you've only got 4 bench players, and you've got greater chances of concussion, injury, suspension, sent off, red card, yellow card, whatever. So you need to have that versatility on your bench, and that's why I'm high on Leotawa for minutes this season. I like Laban, and he fits the mold of the, like, continuing the comparison to the Phoenix. The Phoenix have a very clear playing style, and you need to fit into that playing style to get your opportunities. Laban is the ideal prototype for the edge forwards that Andrew Webster wants, because, you know, half of his runs are going to be coming back into the middle of the field. But then there's also subtle nuance in how they run those lines, where you angle back into the middle, but as you get the ball, you kind of skew back out towards the sideline. So you're not running straight lines. You might just go back in, and then the fourth time you get the ball, you fake to go back in, you go out. That requires athleticism. It requires speed and agility. That's what Laban has. I think that's why Jackson Ford, he's not fast, he's not agile, but he understands the concepts. And I think that's why Kurt Capewell was going to be useful. And Laban just fits the mold there. I've kind of talked myself silly at this point. But I do have some big boppers I want to highlight. So over the summer, I wrote about the Kiwi-NRL young big boppers to watch out for. Over this weekend, we had 4 from that yarn on our website, thenews-case.com, playing NRL trials. Kaius Fa'atili, Hornby Jr. from Christchurch, he was playing for the Storm. Salisi Ata Otahuhu Jr. from Auckland. He was playing against Sebastian Sua for the Knights. Mount Albert Jr., I believe, or Mount Albert Senior, because I don't know if he was playing junior footy. So the Knights had Sua, Sharks had Ata. They were going at each other. The Cowboys had the Jazire Pua'avase, who was a Manurewa Jr. He was in the Cowboys. So those dudes were all playing trials footy. And then there's also Xavier Willison. And we've seen Xavier Willison look pretty damn impressive in a Broncos trial game. He was also pretty damn impressive for the Aotearoa Māori over the weekend. He is a Waikoa Bay Jr. And if we think about how the Aotearoa Kiwis performed end of last year, who were some of the impactful players for them? Leo Thompson, Griffin Neame. Like, there's no shortage of big boppers from Aotearoa. Absolutely not. Because all those dudes are joined by the Warriors Juniors. Now, of course, they're eligible for a wide variety of nations, but specifically under the Kiwi-NRL umbrella, there are no shortage of big boppers. 4 of them were on show in the NRL trials. Xavier Willison is making waves with the Broncos. I'm really excited to see him play footy this year. Leo Thompson building with the Knights. Griffin Neame building with the Cowboys. There's a lot of these really good big boppers. They're massive. They're mobile. You know, Kaius Fa'atili's younger brother, Felix Fa'atili, he's in the Sharks system. Like, these dudes are everywhere. Javan Stevenson-Halle, he's with the Eels. He's fantastic. Elijah Rasmussen with the Dolphins. They're all pretty damn impressive. We might even see Isaac Matalavea Booth with the Bulldogs at some point. He's been off the radar for a while, but we might see him this season with the Bulldogs, Jersey Flag or New South Wales Cup. Once again, there is no issues, and it is the most productive area of Kiwi NRL recruitment. It's the big boppers, and those big boppers, they are only going to help Aotearoa Kiwis, and they're going to flow into Samoa, Tonga, Cook Islands as well. And there's a lot of them, because the dudes I wrote about in my big bopper yarn, there's dudes below them, and there's new dudes every year, and they're coming. And they're coming strong.
Right on. I guess we slide along. What else do we have on the list?
There's no big boppers in the Dragon system, though, from our team.
There are...
Faitala Mariner, but he's injured.
Faitala Mariner is a good signing, though. I like that one.
You do?
Even though it came about weird circumstances, like all of them. Yeah.
The signing of a dude who was the captain of the Bulldogs, and then the Bulldogs didn't want him. That really excites you?
Yeah. But he's not injured, so that's totally the prerequisite for the Dragons, so I'm happy with that.
Okay, let's talk some Blackcaps cricket. So the Blackcaps playing T20s against Australia. There were some changes to the squad. Matt Henry and Tim Seifert have dropped out of the squad, replaced by Ben Sears and Will Young. So Trent Bolt's going to play the second and third games. Tim Southey's playing the first game. Shout out to Australia. Apparently they're sending their full-strength squad. Blackcaps, they're taking the piss. So that's good for us. We like that. You'll see a bit of Josh Clarkson. Really good T20 hitter, but all his stats put him as a better one-day player. He's a fantastic one-day bowler, for example. So yeah, everything's stock standard. As far as I wrote some stats in our newsletter yesterday for Blackcaps who are playing in this series since the last World Cup, which was November 2022 T20 World Cup. Here's one that you'll love. Devon Conway, 189 runs and an average of 17. Big up Devon Conway. The lowest bowling average for a decent amount of wickets, Tim Southey, most wickets, 28 wickets and an average of 16. But then you've also got Ben Sears, 7 wickets at an average of 19. So his inclusion's pretty interesting. And I want to highlight as a player to watch, someone who's got a lot of scope, I believe, to make an impression. And that's Will Young. Because his T20 stats for New Zealand aren't great. But I have seen him dominate some games in the Super Smash, and I think he is one of the best just straight up batters from New Zealand. Aesthetically, mature, experience, craft, it's all there with Will Young. I don't think he's a first 11 T20 player at all. But if he gets an opportunity and he scores runs, I'll be very interested to see how that goes, because I think he is someone who, if he gets a bit of confidence and he figures out how to deploy his style of batting against Australia in T20 cricket, I think it could spark up some momentum for him. And we've seen him smash boundaries, but the way he smashes boundaries is elegant. He's not a slugger. So just watch out for Will Young. See what he does in his limited opportunities, because he won't play all 3 games, I don't think. But I'm just curious what he does in his limited opportunities. And at this stage, I think it would be rude not to remind folks that Michael Bracewell exists. Because we've talked about that a few times. He is someone who could add value for the T20 World Cup. The Blackcaps are playing all their games in the Caribbean. And Michael Bracewell is a fantastic T20 cricketer who is not in this squad. So to me, that puts a bit of pressure on Rachin Ravindra, because you're going to have Sodhi and Santner as the main spinners. And then you're thinking about who's our third spinner, which needs to be an all-rounder at this stage. And I think Glenn Phillips offers enough with the bat and in the field to where he is a mandatory first 11 selection. So then it's like, well, to me, it's getting down to Rachin Ravindra versus Michael Bracewell. Michael Bracewell won't have an opportunity against Australia. Rachin Ravindra will. So what does Rachin Ravindra do with his opportunity? There are 2 lads here since the last World Cup. Will Young, he's averaging 13 with the bat. Rachin Ravindra is averaging 15. Ravindra does have a strike rate of 131, so that's cool. Will Young's only knocking around at 99, sorry. Both of those can't be compared at all to Michael Bracewell, because Michael Bracewell, he's an absolute monster. He is the beast. And do you want me to pull up his stats right now? His T20 stats, just for shits and giggles. Michael Bracewell, T20 internationals, averaging 18, strike rate of 139. A little bit higher than Rachin. With the ball, he's averaging 10. That's significantly better than Rachin. And first-class cricket, domestic T20s, averaging 29, strike rate of 134. And he's averaging, how about this? Michael Bracewell with the ball, bowling in 49 innings, he's averaging 18. So whatever you do not forget about Michael Bracewell, because I still believe he offers value to the Blackcaps for the T20 World Cup. But he's not playing against Australia, so who cares?
Yeah, poor old Michael Bracewell. He was trying to follow the Kane Williamson pattern, I guess, because he was out with different injury. It was an Achilles, not a knee thing. But then he comes back from that, and very quickly, I think they said he broke a finger or something. It's like a finger injury now that he's out. He had to have surgery on or something, which is kind of what Williamson didn't need surgery on his World Cup one, but he did come back, get a finger injury, miss some time, and since then has scored disgusting amounts of runs. So maybe Michael Bracewell is just going to follow the pattern to the letter. Would be nice, because I agree. I think particularly in the T20 format, I think he's much more valuable than Rachin Ravindra, to be honest, who I think is a little bit of a like square peg round hole if you're looking at him as the spinning all-roundery, the extra option there. And because he's a top order batter, really. Like Ravinder, if he's in there earning his way in on his Wellington form, which kind of in this format he hasn't, because we've mentioned a few times the Super Smash numbers are actually kind of bad. Like he's in there on the basis of the all-round value of Rachin Ravindra, the cricketer, and the fact that he's obviously, a young dude whose stats will improve in this format. But his best value would be batting in the top four, and he's not really going to get that opportunity here. If they pick him in line for the World Cup, it would be sort of 6-7, where you want someone who's more of a pure slugger, someone who's just going to clear boundaries from ball one, and that's Michael Bracewell, who I think is also a better bowler in this format. So it is a frustrating one because he came back for a bit, he played some Super Smash, but then gets injured again, and now hasn't been able to make the Blackcaps return. And I think that is an important thing to point out. Like, let's not forget about him, because I do think some of that, again, like a talking point we had a few months ago, was people did maybe forget about him a bit during the World Cup campaign and how valuable he might have been to them in those conditions, just the style of player that he is. I noticed Jimmy Neesham was also mentioned on the thing of being like, because he's away in Bangladesh, I think, at the moment doing I guess it's called BPL. I don't know. The Bangladeshi T20 League.
It's the cricketing oblivion. Like,
he's away in cricketing oblivion.
As soon as you're into that T20 cycle, like, no one cares about you at all.
Which is why I was a little bit surprised he was mentioned there, because people kick up a fuss about the Bolt and is he available and the contract stuff. Well, Jimmy Neesham doesn't have a contract either, and he's doing more T20 stuff than Bolt is. Like, it's just. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's really important, because if people are watching the series against Australia and they're thinking, what's the T20 World Cup first 11 or squad going to look like? Jimmy Neesham's got to be there. He is one of the best T20 cricketers from New Zealand, and he won't be playing against Australia. So you need to keep him in mind, and we both think you need to keep Michael Bracewell in mind as well. So there's two lads right there, let alone Tim Seifert or Matt Henry. Or Kane Williamson.
Kane Williamson, yeah. And Daryl Mitchell's not playing either, right?
Yep, another one.
So there you go, because he's a first 11 dude in every format at this point. Like, it's just funny getting Australia to send their top team, and we've got half of our best 11 playing. But at least we brought back Trent Bolt for them. At least I think he's playing. He's not playing the first game, he's playing the next couple. So we have Australia a taste of their own medicine there. That'll be an interesting. I don't know. I think T20 feels like the format where we're the best shot at taking a series off of them. So, although maybe not if we're not at full strength, I might pivot to the Test series. But no, we'll see how that tracks. That's it's a lot of cricket going on at the moment. But this is the last big series of the summer, isn't it? Other than England are coming to play White Ferns, so. There is still that, but I can't remember when the last time Australia came here for a bit. I think they've Chapel Hadley this series as well for some reason. I guess because we don't play them at ODIs enough, they wanted to keep that idea relevant. But good cricket. Nice to have Australia in the shores. It's they don't come here often enough, and we probably don't play them often enough in general.
Well, as long as we're not playing one of those disgusting 5-test series that just go on and on. Josh Clarkson is a really interesting bloke, because he's in the squad and he has a T20 batting strike rate of 148. As I said,
enormous.
His bowling average is first class 41, list A 25, T20 35. So, and he started his Blackcaps ODI career with a bowling average of 24. So his best bowling does come in the one-day format, but then he's also got this T20 batting record of 28 average, strike rate of 148, which is a wee bit disgusting, especially when you package it with Finn Allen, with Glenn Phillips, with a Mark Chapman, Daryl Mitchell, who won't be playing. It's pretty decent. And the other thing, again, I wrote about this in the Ford Trophy. We've talked a lot about the young seamers in Aotearoa. We've got the tall seamers. We've got I had issues with this last podcast as well. We've got the seamers. We got the swingers. We've also got the fast blokes, because we've got Lockie Ferguson, we've got Adam Milne, and we've got Ben Sears in the same squad. The Ford Trophy elimination final. It will be played in Dunedin. Otago versus Auckland. And then on Saturday, we have Canterbury versus the winner. And they'll be played in Christchurch. As I just said, young seamers, they're pretty good in Aotearoa. You got Christian Clark for Northern Districts. He finishes as the leading wicket taker in the Ford Trophy. ND, CD, and Wellington didn't make the finals. But Christian Clark, he's got a one-day list day bowling average of 21, sorry. Oh, my God. Kind of defeated.
It's got a lot better, yeah.
Yeah, defeated the purpose of how I was trying to say that. Let me redo it. Christian Clark, he's got a list day average of 21 with the ball, and he was just the leading wicket taker in the Ford Trophy. So maybe he's pretty good at bowling. Leading wicket takers, Christian Clark, Blair Tickner, Ray Toole. Ray Toole is an emerging lefty who is also good in Blackcaps Shield. But then we get to Luke Georgeson and Zach Folks, who both have 15 wickets. And then, of course, Big War, who has 13 wickets at an average of 17. He's averaging below 20 in all domestic formats this season. Luke Georgeson is the bloke to watch out for in the elimination final because he's got 15 wickets this season. He's taken 12 wickets in his last 3 games, including 2 fifers against his former team, Wellington. I think Zach Folks is better because Zach Folks bowls massive in swing. He's got the straight delivery. He's got the change ups. He's a really crafty batter. I think he's a better batter than Luke Georgeson. However, they are both extremely skillful all-rounders. So you're going to have Luke Georgeson playing for Otago. Otago have also got Matt Bacon, who's pretty good with the ball. They've got a good bowling attack. They've got Ben Lockrose as their spinner. Jacob Duffy is always a factor in domestic cricket. And, of course, Andrew Hazeldine, the aggressive lefty, who bowls really fast. And let me double check if he's got a how his batting strike rate's going. He's got 106 runs at a strike rate of 143. So he's an aggressive batter and he's an aggressive lefty. Hostile seam from Andrew Hazeldine. Otago's best batter is Thorne Parks, who's a young, I think he's also a lefty. He might be lefty. He is a youngster, 23 years old. And he's got a one-day batting average of 59 in his first major campaign of Ford Trophy. So he's the leading figure for Otago. So Otago have Luke Georgeson, really hot young seamer, 12 wickets in his last 3 games. And they've also got Thorne Parks, really interesting young batter. Auckland, they got Rob O'Donnell. And Rob O'Donnell's the only dude with over 400 runs. He's the only dude with 350s and a century. He's an extremely good cricketer. Along with Brad Schmullian and Joe Carter, those 3 are probably the best domestic trooper Ford Trophy batters this season. Auckland won't have Fenelon. Fenelon's stats are still incredible, averaging 56 with a strike rate of 123 in 7 Ford Trophy games. Auckland, Ben Lister's the main bowler I'm interested in. Lefty, another lefty. So we've got Ray Toole's a good lefty. Ben Lister's a really funky lefty, as we always talk about. He's got 11 wickets at an average of 22. So watch out for him in this elimination final. And if I'm zoning in on the young seamers, I'll be really interested to see what happens to Jock McKenzie. I'm curious if he's a first 11 player, if he makes the team for this elimination final. And how he performs. Because I think he's just another fantastic young seamer who hasn't been dominant in his debut season, but he's got really impressive signs. The omens are there for Jock McKenzie as a funky seamer. Just like Christian Clark, Ray Toole, Luke Georgeson, Zach Folks, Will O'Rourke. Josh Clarkson as well. He's got a fantastic record, but he won't be playing. The Cantabs, well, Zach Folks. Can't go past Zach Folks. What would you set the over-under? Well, it's all under. I need to figure out a cleaner way of saying this, but because it's a good little gimmick. Zach Folks averages under this mark in all three formats. What's your guess? With the ball, sorry, with the ball.
Well, it might be with both, but if I guess high
it's
enough,
almost with
right.
both. Almost.
Yeah. I mean, I could win this game by just saying like 100, obviously, but that's no fun.
Correct.
So we'll go further.
Yeah, good on you, mate.
28.
Jeepers creepers. The dude I keep talking about, you're going to say 28.
Well, you said all three formats. You could average
all,
14, 14, and 27.9 or something, it might be one. So I'm guessing we can go lower then. Let's say 24.
How about we go 23, because he averages 22 in first-class cricket, 22 in list A cricket, and 15 in T20s.
See, that's outrageous.
So that's why we're talking about Zach Folks, because he does good things in cricket. So watch out for him. He'll be playing with Canterbury. They might have Will O'Rourke, which will be fascinating because I don't think he's playing. Well, he's not playing the T20 against Australia, so he might be lining up for Canterbury. Chad Bowes has been fantastic for Canterbury, averaging 36 with a strike rate of 94, which is quintessential Chad Bowes. But also, the one and only legend of New Zealand cricket. He's not the best batter ever, but he's damn sure close. The one and only Henry Nicholls, Ford Trophy this season, 295 runs, average of 98, strike rate of 93. Super Smash, 317 runs, average of 39, strike rate of 142. Plunkett Shield, 393 runs, average of 78, strike rate of 58. So Henry Nicholls, since being dropped from the Blackcaps, he's averaging 78 in the Plunkett Shield, 98 in the Ford Trophy, and a very healthy Super Smash average of 39. Big up Henry Nicholls. He will be playing for Canterbury as well.
Yeah, well, Henry Nicholls never did have a problem scoring runs in New Zealand, so that adds up. If they played some Super Smash in India, he might have trouble, but I don't think he'd be the only one, to be fair.
He's not the best batter in New Zealand, because that's Kane Williamson, but he might be the second best batter in New Zealand because he's a legend in Aotearoa conditions. There's also the HBJ Shield final, which will be Otago versus Wellington. And this is a fairly typical matchup in the HBJ Super Smash ranks, but I want to just throw out some nuggets here. Francis Mackay, Lee Kasperick, they are both top 10 for runs and wickets, so shout out to them. Wellington's Jess McFadden, she's the leading run scorer right now, heading into the final. So she's the leading run scorer, she's the best wicketkeeper in New Zealand, but she doesn't play for the White Ferns. And all the leading run scorers are senior domestic troopers. You've got a bit of George Atkinson, she's averaging 34, and this is and Georgia Plummer as well has had a good season for Wellington. I put a clip up of Kate Chandler. She scored a half century in the last game for Wellington. She is a very good young cricketer. She's 17 years old, and she's scoring runs, taking wickets in domestic cricket. But I think back to the Super Smash final, and it was a bit weird because I'd seen her stats, I've seen her play a bit, and I know she's a good cricketer. Come to the Super Smash final, batting at Eden Park, which this only reinforced my idea about how difficult batting at Eden Park is on that pitch. We've seen it with touring teams playing T20s and one days at Eden Park. It's not easy. It's a funky pitch. And the pitch is far more significant, I believe, than the actual dimensions of Eden Park. She couldn't hit the ball. There was just delivery outside off stump, swing and a miss, swing and a miss, swing and a miss. So it was unfortunate for Kate Chandler, but she is 17 years old with 2 half centuries and an average of 30 in the HBJ Shield this season. So watch out for her. And who else am I going to highlight here? Emma Black, she's an Otago seamer. She is first for wickets. 21 wickets at an average of 11. Kaylee Knight, she's a Northern District seamer. She just took 7 wickets in a game. I think that was on Saturday. Who's third? Who's fourth for wickets? Lee Kasparek, Francis Mackay. There's far more young bowlers in the top of the wicket-taking charts. Batting skews towards the senior players. So young bowlers in the top 10. We've got Emma Black, Kaylee Knight, Eden Carson, Zara Jetley, the sneakiest championship cricketer in New Zealand, Sarah Asmussen, Gabby Sullivan, and Marama Downs. So again, this is the same as men's cricket in the Ford Trophy and the other formats. The young seamers are really good. Marama Downs, one of the best Super Smash seamers. Now she's averaging 22 in the HBJ Shield. Zara Jetley, Championship Mana. Mahi as well. She's averaging 21 with the ball. Eden Carson's averaging 15. Jetley and Carson aren't seamers, but they're still young and it still applies. Top 2 bowlers in the HBJ Shield this season. 2 young seamers. So there it is. And
not a lot of white ferns in the players you list today.
You just took that out of my mouth.
Carson and Plymmer, but did they? Because I think the start of the HBJ might have clashed with when Pakistan was here, so they might not have played so much. But
a little bit, but
I'm not sure.
Not a whole lot.
A couple of others have had rests as well, but
yeah, they're also just not taking wickets. You know, that's
what not taking wickets.
This is the thing about the white ferns; they don't exactly dominate domestic cricket either. After earning selection for the White Ferns, or they earn selection for the White Ferns after not dominating domestic cricket. And that is the case right now because the best players in the HBJ, or the best bowlers in HBJ Shield, Carson is 5th and she's the only current White Fern. She's the best current White Fern and she's 5th. If we go, Hannah Rowe is 9th. That's it. For current White Ferns bowlers. And it tells you all you need to know about White Ferns cricket. So there's a bumper Ford Trophy preview with lots of stats, lots of information on our website. I'll be doing the same for HBJ Shield Final, so watch out for that if you love your cricket. But right now we need to talk some football, and the football Ferns, they've qualified for the Olympics. Paki all round for them. They won all the games they needed to win in the Oceania qualification tournament, and they won by lots of goals. I don't expect you to tell me anything about their performances, because I don't really care. They won the games, it was easy, and what I don't like is seeing the words like thrashed to describe these games.
Or at the start of the tournament, people getting upset because they weren't thrashing them by as much.
Well, they're just, it's more you don't need to say they thrashed Fiji. It just seems a bit it's a bit of a bully thing to do. It's Fiji football. Yeah. It's Solomon Islands football.
It's bloodthirsty.
And it's New Zealand coming up against them. We expect them to win. As a New Zealand media outlet, you don't need to say the football Ferns thrash whoever. Whatever. Let's come together. Bit of empathy for the opposition there, because they are clearly not as good as New Zealand football or the football Ferns. But as always, I'm interested in what players caught your attention, because yesterday in our newsletter, you basically rolled out a whole nother White Ferns squad. And I'm curious, given the depth that you have described in our newsletter and throughout the Niche Cache on the website, Podcast Corridor, everything we do, again, especially the youngsters, which youngsters made a significant impression for you in a very tricky kind of talent ID environment? Who caught your eye and boosted their case for more football Ferns starting opportunities or just game time? Because players who weren't in that tournament, you got Aaron Naylor, CJ Bott, Ali Riley, Michaela Moore, Rhea Percival, Malia Steinmetz, Olivia Chance, Millie Clegg, Paige Satchel. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of competition for spots. So who made the best impression on you?
Yeah, and most of those players you listed there, if not all of them, I can't remember, were at the World Cup, like part of the World Cup squad, which was a very specific, these are the best players we have. Obviously, World Cup, you're picking your ultimate squad. So there was a bit of yeah, there were a few opportunities around. And like you say, it's a difficult environment to judge players because the games aren't that competitive. Um, and you did see through the first few rounds, particularly group stage, a bit of game management, kind of dealing with the fact that they're playing in playing in Samoa in February. So you can imagine, like, you know how sometimes they have the drinks breaks. Here they had 4 drinks breaks per game. Like every 15 minutes, they had a drinks break. After 15 minutes, after 30 minutes, obviously there's a halftime break, 60, 75, 4 drinks breaks through the game. Um, Always using all your subs. So it's going to be a bit of it's a weird situation. You can't really judge the competition of what they're playing against versus what they're actually trying to um, get towards. Like this isn't any way, shape, or form a reflection of, well, they scored 11 goals against the Solomon Islands, therefore they're going to be way better at beating like England or France or Germany or USA or something. Like there's no relevance to between those things. But you can compare players to other players and who has the most impact and who's out there trying to make things happen. So like I mean, you can't really say much about the goalkeepers or the defense. Like Rebecca Stott, Katie Bowen, fantastic, of course, but you know they weren't really challenged. Um, the attacking players was where it got quite interesting because obviously that's the aspect where the team is trying to improve the most. And I think there's 3 players who stood out who I'll say well, there's just 3 players who I think stood out and advanced. There's a few others who advanced their cases quite interestingly, but there's 3 players that particularly stood out in my mind from having watched this. One was Macy Fraser, who got a concussion in the 3rd game, so didn't play the semi or the final. But up until that point, when they were playing with a bit more rotation and not quite as strong of a team in those early rounds, Macy Fraser in her first tour with the Football Ferns is out there demanding the ball and saying like, "Let me create stuff." Same stuff she does for the Wellington Phoenix. She's thrown in the Fraser shuffle. She scored a direct free kick. Just yeah, doing exciting things where she's actively trying to be the person to pull the strings and create stuff for a team with players around her. Like, you know, she's been playing alongside Betsy Hassett, who has over 150 caps, and here's Macy Fraser getting caps 1, 2, and 3, and not calling seniority, but you know, just being proven herself to be a key player who is pretty much, I think, an instant. She's going to be an instant regular with the Ferns now. Like from this point onwards, she's going to be making every squad. The other 2 players who stood out, and they didn't play a heap in the first couple games, and that's when the Ferns weren't scoring very many goals, and then these players start getting more prominent roles, and suddenly the Ferns are scoring a whole lot more goals. Not a coincidence. 2 players who I can't really say they've advanced their cases because I think they're already first 11 players, but they're 2 players who exemplify the fact that this team for the last sort of 5 years has been trying to rebuild its attack. Like they had a bunch of strikers retire after actually had a couple of strikers come out of retirement to play in the 2019 World Cup. It's kind of just been Hannah Wilkinson and a bunch of kids since then. I don't think you can call them a bunch of kids now because Indy Riley and Jackie Han were outstanding for the Ferns throughout these games. They're the 2 players in particular who were just dribbling past players. They weren't just passing and moving and running. Like they were doing those things, but they're also just skipping around tackles and just being quicker and sharp feet and both scoring and assisting, a lot of goals between them. They were, yeah, fantastic. And they're both progressed heaps in their club careers in the last couple of years. Indy Riley's playing at PSV Eindhoven now, and Jackie Hand is playing at Lewistown in the England's 2nd tier, but only until the end of the season. And I expect there's a better gig in England coming at the end of that because she's racking up highlights. And I quite like the idea of just going to a team in the 2nd tier who need a lot of help and attack, going in there, scoring some goals and sending up some stuff. I think she's got 1 assist already, but she's only played a couple games. And Indy Riley's been starting most games for PSV and has scored a couple goals for them, a couple superb goals, actually. And yeah, those players really influential, particularly because the way they picked the team, they switched to a 4-3-3 after the first game, and then you just kind of just pick attacking players in the midfield roles. You know, you're going to have the ball around the other team's penalty area, so why not? So Indy Riley was playing a lot of midfield, which meant she was able to combine very directly with Jackie Hand. And I think Grace Jale got a lot of goal scoring opportunities on the left wing because the right wing was operating so at such a high level with Hand and Riley creating stuff and then putting crosses over towards where Jale was. Jale was the top scorer with 7 goals, but she also, including a hat trick in the semi-final, but it also felt like she should have had double that amount. Like she missed a couple sitters and the finishing wasn't as sharp as it could be. So while she was the top scorer, also felt like there's kind of a clear aspect of improvement required there, but she'll get around to that. But Jackie Hand, Macy Fraser, Indy Riley, if that's like the attacking core of the team moving forwards, chuck in a bit of Millie Clegg once she gets settled in America, I don't have a problem with that. I think this team they're not going to suddenly be scoring bundles and bundles and bundles of goals against the best teams in the world. But I think this little sort of the low patch that we've had over the last couple of years of them hardly being able to score anything, I think we're coming out of that if those players are going to be the players that we can build our attack around in the future.
The Wellington Phoenix women were playing in Australia, and that meant
they were. So guess what happened?
Yeah, so they lost, so that's all good. And the Wellington Phoenix men, they had a very tricky encounter against Macarthur FC, a game which was delayed by a thunderstorm, I believe. And you also noted that they lost a player in the warm-up?
Yeah, Alex Rufer was named to start and then didn't end up starting after when they came back from the delay. So I guess an hour was too long of a warm-up. He had been carrying an injury. He'd been subbed off earlier the week before as well.
Rufer's a champion. Because they were trying to get him to talk about the injury after the last home game. He's like, oh, no, nothing, just a niggle. Like, he is very Kane Williamson-esque. Very, obviously, very Kiwi.
Very Shea Ili-esque as well.
Very Kiwi. You also noted that the Wellington Phoenix were playing without Criev, Sutton, Pennington, Payne, and Zavada was only on the bench. So take that and hold that for a second. The woman, you've noted a few times that they can't even roll out the same team for back-to-back games. So to me, that kind of frames the woman's up and down form. It's home and away, but it's also got the home and away issues are delivered with a new game day team for each game. So it's not like they're losing away, winning at home with the same squad for every game. And then we've also got a blokes team who encountered a fair amount of adversity in Macarthur, the delay, players out injured, but they got the win. And I don't know if I don't know if there's much to talk about with the women as far as analyzing why they lost, because we know what's happening here. But you've also dropped a bunch of information in our newsletter about young players who are getting game time. So I think this season is going to be incredibly beneficial to them. The benefit of not having the same team week in, week out is that everyone's getting experience, and that will only develop them quicker. I think that's what we've already seen with the men. So now the men are in a position where they can deal with the adversity and the youngsters are able to pounce on their opportunities. You can take that whichever way. I suspect the youngster theme is headlining us here again.
Yeah, well, that was the only real positive to take from the women's game, because they've been losing by 1 goal every time they played away. They actually lost 3-0 here, but the difference was that they had half their team missing because a bunch of them were with the football Ferns and they weren't able to get this. They asked to get this game delayed. They managed to get last week's game delayed, but there was no room apparently to reschedule this, even though there's an empty weekend coming up because there's a FIFA break. But then also that's like Oceania's fault for scheduling their tournament outside the FIFA window when there's a FIFA window literally a week afterwards. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure on what the logic was there, but
the weather.
Like at least with all those players missing, we did still, we got to see Daisy Brazendale make her first start in the A-League. I think she's the youngest player in the squad. I can't remember if Helena Arrington's younger or not, because she wasn't with the team at the start of the season. She came back and joined them. But yeah, Brazendale, defensive midfielder from Nelson. I hadn't really seen anything of her when she was given a scholarship contract, but I did see her play a couple times for the reserve since then. And what we saw on the weekend was very similar. Just I think maybe the pace of the game was a little bit to adjust to, because she was getting stuck in, but she wasn't winning her challenges. However, in the National League stuff, that was the thing that stood out very particularly, as she's a hard tackling, ball winning midfielder. And very young, like only 17 or 18, probably 18 at this point, I think. Helena Arrington got some time off the bench, player I'm a big fan of from having seen her play for age grade teams for New Zealand and also for Capital Football a couple of years ago in the National League. She, I thought, could also have started, but I understand why you don't want to put a couple like teenagers in their first starts together in the same team in the midfield when you're away from home and already struggling for form. I can understand that, but Arrington looks sharp off the bench. She's got a similar thing to Macy Fraser about her, where there's just an eye for a pass and an understanding of what's going to happen, not just from what I'm doing right now, like this control pass, who am I going to pass to, but like where the ball's going to end up 3 passes down the line and the move, like how things unfold on a football pitch. She's got an understanding of that Macy Fraser also shows, which is very exciting. They're both with the Wellington Phoenix now, so Ellen McMillan, captain of the reserves team, got some time off the bench. Like there's some nice opportunities there for good players who are getting some growth out of it. But the team, they had their biggest loss of the season, and it was very clearly because they were missing a bunch of their international New Zealand players, and also Mariana Speckmeyer was out injured. So you take your top scorer and a bunch of your internationals out. Well, what do you think is going to happen, right? You lose about 7 of your best players. You're probably going to lose 3-0. And they did. The men's team missing not quite as many players, but missing a bunch and having to throw similarly, like Brazendale makes her first start for the women. Finn Conchi makes his first start for the men. Things like that where the depth is tested. The youngsters got to step up. The difference with the Phoenix Blokes at the moment, they're just at a different stage of their progression, is they can do that. And they've been so resilient throughout this whole, which is we made the Warriors Phoenix comparison before. The word resilient popped in my head, and as soon as it did, I had visions of Sean Johnson saying it about the Warriors at the start of last season, because I think there's a similar thing there where it's like the Phoenix aren't grinding teams out. I mean, the Phoenix aren't thrashing teams. They're not doing New Zealand Herald headlines about the football Ferns and Oceania stuff. They are grinding teams out to get that round in the right place. They're winning teams on the back. They're winning games on the back of excellent defense and scoring just enough goals. And they I thought. I've said several times, like Alex Paulson's been as good as any goalkeeper in the A-League this season. I've said several times I think Finn Sermon and Scott Wooden have been superb, both of them. Like Finn Sermon as well as Wooden, an import and an academy player in his first year as a first 11 player, although third year in the sort of senior team environment. Isaac Hughes stepped up in this game to give him a back 3, basically because they didn't have enough midfielders to fill out a midfield, so they had to go to a back 3, put one of those midfielders deeper in. I thought Hughes had a fantastic game in this one, a couple like lunging, challenging blocks and winning his headers and just courageous defensive work on par with what Sermon and Wooden were doing. And that kind of that kind of environment where the fringe players step up and absolutely look comfortable and at home and aligned with the first 11 players that they're alongside, is someone's clearly working there. And the way they were able to there was a lot of talk from the commentary box towards the end of that game about the Wellington Phoenix being masters of the dark arts and time wasting and stuff like that. I think there's a little bit of sour grapesy kind of feel when they start pointing that out specifically about the Phoenix, as if every team doesn't do that stuff. But I do think there's an element of truth to that. But I also, when they're saying that, the thing I'm thinking of is Well, the Phoenix are winning late in games so often. Like that's the thing that stands out is they're in a position to be able to waste time. Like they might have been doing this in every other season, except they're not winning in with 5 minutes to go and trying to keep the ball in the corner or making late substitutions to wind down the clock and stuff like that, take the momentum out of stuff. Like they're doing that now because they're winning all the time. They've all got these leads to protect. That's the impressive thing. On top of the fact they're protecting them. They're not, they're not conceding. I can't think of any like desperate late equalizers they've been conceding. They've drawn a lot of games, but those have mostly been games where they've hung on to draw or games where it's just been sort of like two even teams, not games that they've thrown away to end up with only a point. They're extremely good at that stuff. And I can't help but feel so much of what they're doing this season is built very specifically on that defensive foundation, which is itself built upon a couple of academy players and key roles with Paulson and Sermon doing what they're doing. So, I mean, that's being able to win a game like they did against MacArthur. That's the kind of performance that will win you a playoff game. And they're 5 points clear at the top. It's very hard not to get excited about where the Phoenix are heading. Like, I don't want to think too far ahead, but also like this is a team that is actually built to be good in knockout kind of football stages should they hold on and get to those points. Like, this is a team that's built in a way that can handle that kind of pressure and handle that environment. And it's been a long time since we've had that Phoenix. Like they've been making a lot of final series, but they haven't won a finals game for about a decade. Like they haven't won a finals game since Paul Eiffel was playing, They've probably got as good a chance as ever this year. That's rare territory to be in.
Let's finish with an editing note. An editorial note, maybe. I don't know. We're not in some journalistic newsroom, so who really gives a crap?
Letter from the editor?
Where... Definitely not a letter from the editor. Planning and preparation. When do we get into the zone where we are leading the podcast with Wellington Phoenix men and I'm trying to talk you into weekly Wellington Phoenix men game recaps or just like a weekly deep dive into Wellington Phoenix football because they're so good? Like,
we're pretty close.
I kind of want it right now, and I'm trying to pull you into a weekly Wellington Phoenix yarn. But also, I need to take responsibility as the driver of the podcast to try and, because at the moment we're still Wellington Phoenix. They're still shuffled to the back end of the podcast, and I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, when do we put the Wellington Phoenix men into the front and center position? They are the best team in the A-League. They are a crack at winning the whole thing. They're at least going to be a funky finals contender. Continuing the comparison between the Warriors and the Phoenix, like when are we going all in on Wellington Phoenix? Like, is it a few weeks away? Is it time to, we need to start actually doing it right now? What are your thoughts?
All in? Probably, because there's about 9 games to go, I think, for them. Something like that. I'd say all in is a couple weeks away when we start being able to like picture the full on thing. I think like being able to picture what the table might look like at the end. Are they still competing for a minor premiership? How are we looking in that kind of front? That's a couple weeks away, but I think the ramping up process starts immediately.
So I need to be watching more Wellington Phoenix, and I need to be trying to spin you into a weekly sort of deep dive for the website.
I guess so. I mean, they keep talking because there was the thing with the CEO a couple of weeks ago trying to argue like, well, the Phoenix are in a great position. Why aren't people getting on board with them in the bandwagon way that the Warriors got? And which I felt kind of a little bit desperate when they start saying that stuff. It's like, what about us? Kind of, it's like, let it unfold naturally as it happened with the Warriors, and don't try to copy the things that you don't have to find a slogan like "up the wires." I mean, the Warriors would have got the same crowds whether people were saying "up the wires" or saying nothing. The crowds turned up not because they had something to shout. They turned up because the team was really good and fun and exciting, and there was a movement that developed around that. The Phoenix can get there. It just, the Warriors peaked around the finals, right? You know, that's when the bandwagon stuff
Like,
got things. So the Phoenix are not there yet. So that's the process we're on, I guess.
yeah, I don't care about the Phoenix. I care about us. When are we changing how we're
well,
doing
we're ahead of the curve. That's what I'm saying. We got to get in there
but I think
before the snowball
again,
process.
I'm trying to get you to write about the Wellington Phoenix every week because I know there's Wellington Phoenix fans out there who need the content that you can deliver. But also to me, when am I stepping in and saying the Wellington Phoenix are the big story of the podcast? You know, like, are we trying to warm up to get into this mode next week, or are we trying to? Is it a few weeks away? You've still got some issues you want to resolve with what you're seeing on the field. Like, where are we at with that?
Let's say a couple of weeks because we do have a big Blackcaps test series and some of the NRL round one is coming up soon. I think that's the thing about the writing is I can't I would write a Phoenix piece every day if I could, but it's not feasibly possible. I'll get the football Ferns thing done, and then I've had tall Ferns big focus recently.
Yeah, that's all right. That's right.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
But
I do want to write about their defensive shape because I think that's the foundation of everything. That's probably the next one. And I did get the Academy one a couple of days ago up, so there's that one's gone nicely.
But it is kind of funny. You're saying that you're talking about the what the Phoenix were like from their perspective, and then you're like, well, there's a Blackcap series. There's
I know. I did think I said that. I was like, oh, I'm kind of doing the same thing.
But, I mean, the Phoenix are top of the league.
Yeah, and hopefully they stay top of the league. But it doesn't matter who's top of the league with 3 months to go. It's who's top of the league at the end.
What's if I ask you right here, right now, can the Wellington Phoenix win the A-League championship this season?
Can they? Yeah, I think they can. Would I bet on it? Not yet. We'll see. But can they? They? Yes, I think they're capable of it.
We'll build on that. We both believe the Wellington Phoenix can win the A-League this season, and we'll hopefully every week we might just try ramp it up a bit as they start to build momentum.
Yeah, that's the way.
There we go. Righto. Big up to everyone listening. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chit chit.